Good afternoon, everybody. It's 4:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Fink, and I'll be moderating today's press conference. First of all, I want to appreciate everybody for joining us this afternoon. I know it's 4:30 on a Friday, but appreciate you jumping in. And also, before we get started, I want to thank our friends up the IT folks up on campus who are helping us make this happen today. Obviously, it's been a busy day. A lot of news has come from the SEC office earlier today, as you saw, and we've sent out a couple of press releases as well. So what's going to happen now is Coach Tanner is going to make an opening statement, then we're going to open it up for any questions you may have. Please use the live event Q&A button on your screen to type in your questions. I'll read them, and then Coach Tanner will respond. If you would, please provide a name so we know who's asking the question. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Coach Tanner.
Thank you, Steve, and thank all of y'all for taking a little time to visit with us this afternoon. I know that some of you may have some questions, and I'd like to share a few remarks before we begin. First, I know you're well aware of the decision that came down today from the Southeastern Conference, Commissioner Sankey, our presidents and chancellors that have given us the opportunity to bring our student athletes back to campus beginning on June 8th to begin weightlifting and conditioning for fall preseasons and fall seasons that we're all hopeful for. So we're very grateful for that, to try to get back to some sort of normalcy while we go through this period of uncertainty. I would like to make sure that we all understand, and it's very important and serious, that the health, safety, and well-being of all of our student athletes, our students, our faculty, our staff, our coaches, and everybody on campus are our number one priority. That will remain our status throughout this endeavor, with athletics returning to campus, with some students returning to campus, and what we do going forward. That is our number one priority and will be our focus. I do have some points to talk to you today just about Gamecock athletics and our protocols that we've developed for our student athletes that even exceed the CDC guidelines to ensure that this is a priority. Our protocols and procedures will be constantly reviewed to ensure student athletes on campus are receiving the highest quality care. Also, all medical decisions related to practice and competition will be made by our medical director, Dr. Chris Mazaway, in consultation with team physicians and medical staff. While these protocols pertain to all of our student athletes, most of what I'm visiting with you today relate to the sport of football. Details about our other sports arrival on campus will mirror these details, but will likely change based on their facilities, workouts, guidelines, and the date in which they will return. And if you will allow me, I would like to recognize a couple of people, more than just a couple, that have been so instrumental in getting us to this point today here at our university. I want to thank and appreciate the work of Judy Van Horn, who's our Deputy Athletics Director for Internal Operations and Risk Management, along with Dr. Zoe Foster, one of our team doctors, John Kasich, who's our Associate Athletics Director of Sports Medicine, George Wynn, who's the Football Operations Director, Clint Haggard, our head athletic trainer, and Dr. Chris Mazaway that I've mentioned, who is our USC Athletics Medical Director. Also, Chance Miller, our Senior Deputy Athletics Director, on the development of all these protocols and procedures. Coach Muschamp was intimately involved as well, as we came up with this protocol moving forward. Also, President Kasdan would not want me to mention his name, but I feel that it is appropriate that his approach, comprehensive and strategic, thoughtful and aggressive, inclusive and detailed, has been outstanding. I believe the decisions that we have made at our university have made us stronger, and we're better suited to come back from this pandemic. What I'm getting ready to share with you is part of an informal informational document that you will receive and is available, but I wanted to take the time to go over it even though you can access it. It's COVID-19 protocols and procedures that are related to testing, facility operations, our daily protocols, and education. First, I want to talk about testing. Upon arrival at our university, all of our student athletes will be given a COVID-19 and an antibody test. All student athletes must have a negative COVID-19 result before taking part in voluntary workouts or the start of practice activities to immediately learn whether or not this student may have the virus. The antibody test indicates that the student may have previously had the virus. Any student who tests positive for COVID-19 will immediately be isolated from the team and either return home or remain on campus until the end of the isolation period. The university will interview the student to trace contacts that they have occurred with other individuals. Medical staff will provide health monitoring of the student multiple times each day, and football staff, dietitians, counselors, and student development staff will consistently keep in close contact with the student during the isolation period. Should a roommate or member of his cluster test positive, the player must quarantine or players themselves for 14 days from the last exposure of the positive individual. Those individuals will be monitored daily by the athletic trainer. If the individuals develop symptoms themselves, they would be referred to the team physician and staff at Student Health Services. The return to workouts would only occur after the player is symptom-free for the 14-day quarantine period. Second, our facilities. The facilities used by the football players have undergone a strict cleaning process to ensure that they are fully disinfected. Touch surfaces in all of these facilities will be disinfected at least once per day. There will be staggered entry and departure from the Long Family Football Operations Center. Cell phones, keys, and other personal items are disinfected upon entry into these facilities. Additional hand sanitizing stations will be in the lobby area, elevator, all lobby entrances, and our parking garage at 650 Lincoln, where student athletes have their own campus housing. Third is our daily protocol. A daily medical check will be administered to each student or staff member before entering the Long Family Football Operations building. This includes a checklist of symptoms and a temperature check. Student athletes who exhibit COVID-19 will be evaluated by a medical professional for appropriate follow-up. All football players and staff will be required to wear face coverings in public places and wash their hands frequently. Physical distancing with staff and students will be emphasized. As an added precaution, players will be divided into small clusters. This helps limit any possible exposure to COVID-19 within our football team. Workouts, housing accommodations, eating, and socializing activities will be restricted to teammates in a player's cluster. Ready-made meals will be available to all players and distributed to keep the players' cluster together. Strict protocols are used in the weight room and athletics training spaces, using physical distancing as well as disinfecting of machines and other apparatus. Our last one, education. In addition to the rigorous safety protocols in place, there will be extensive educational efforts, including videos, in-person communication, and signage. Our medical staff will have an educational session next week with parents of the players to provide them with information and answer questions that they may have. In concluding my remarks, I know that the last couple of months have been difficult for a lot of people. COVID-19 has caused more than 400 deaths in our state and over 10,000 positive cases. Businesses have been hurting. Many people have lost their jobs, have had salaries affected or benefits cut. Schools have not had in-person instruction, and memories of childhoods and young adulthood have been forever impacted. In our department, we've heard from many people who want us to play football this fall. I think most of our players want to be in the same position. We have a lot of things to work through before we get there, but we are preparing and planning for a full season. However, we will always have a priority, as I mentioned earlier, for the health, safety, and well-being of all of our student athletes, coaches, and staff. Thank you for your patience in allowing me to share that information. And now, Mr. Fink, I'll be glad to answer some questions.
All right, we'll open it up for questions. Again, if you have a question, please use the live Q&A button on your screen and type it in. The first question comes from David Cloninger at the Post and Courier. Coach, is there a uniform date that all athletes can report before June 8th? And will all fall sport athletes, along with basketball, be allowed to return at that time?
That's a good question. The ruling that you saw today, you're allowed to be back in the weight room on June 8th. Prior to going to the weight room on June 8th, testing will have to take place and those results will have to be delivered to us. So the football players, for instance, will be back prior to June 8th to go through that testing period so that they're cleared to go June 8th. As far as the other athletes are concerned, they are also allowed to come back. Most of them informally have told me that they're going to wait a period of time before they return, but the SEC and the presidents and chancellors have given us the opportunity to come back June 8th. But the fall sports and both basketball programs probably will report at a later date.
Next question comes from Ben Briner at the State. Coach, what is the process that goes into disinfecting the facilities, and is that handled by USC or is that contracted out?
Well, I'll tell you that Jeff Davis, who is our Associate Athletics Director, spearheads this internally, but it is an outsourcing and we have people on staff. But I can't give you the expertise that he could give you, but I can assure you that it is a proper disinfecting on a regular basis has already begun, that we will try to keep everything safe for our student athletes and staff, as I mentioned earlier.
Next questions come from Josh Kendall at The Athletic. Josh has several questions. I'll just start with a couple and break it down for you a little easier. First, is there a threshold for how many positive tests among the team and staff members that would result in shutting down the attempt to return? And if so, what is that threshold?
We have not established any sort of threshold, and I'm very hopeful and prayerful that that will never become an issue with our protocol that we will go through, as I mentioned to you, with the COVID test and antibody test, and continuing to monitor our athletes on a daily basis. We're very hopeful and optimistic that we will not get into that situation. But to answer your question, there is not a threshold established.
Will there be regular testing for all players after the initial test, or will that additional testing be based only on potential symptoms?
There could be regular testing, but certainly there will be testing based on symptoms when a young man or a young woman reports to their facility in a particular day. If there's reason or question that they should be tested, they will be. It will happen at that time. So that's the way we'll handle that. I can't tell you exactly how many random tests we may have, but anytime there's any signs that we need to test after the initial process, we will do so.
You mentioned the players being in clusters. How big is a cluster of players?
I'm going to tell you that Paul Jackson, our strength and conditioning coach, and George Wynn and Coach Muschamp spent a lot of time doing the clustering. I might not be exact when I tell you this, but it's probably 4 to 6, just looking at their documentation and their protocol, that we'll be able to get back to campus. We'll do our testing in clusters as well, and they'll have a chance to be isolated while we get the results of the test back. So if there is a positive, or if there's an antibody positive, they will not be in a situation that they've been around all of their teammates at that point. So that the isolation period will be very important to us. So to go back to the original question, it's maybe closer to 4 than 6.
Will Chris Mazaway have the final say on the status of any player as it pertains to COVID-19 symptoms or exposure, as far as when that player returns to the team?
Well, being our medical director, certainly Dr. Mazaway will have a big say in what we do, but we have outstanding medical people on our campus, and also Clint Haggard and his staff, John Kasich, and so many people involved that we will have consultation. But Dr. Mazaway will be the person that certainly if you call it the final say, he'll be consulted on any decisions that are made.
And finally, from Josh, how daunting and undertaking has it been to get a grasp on all this and establish the protocols? And then how daunting do you expect it to be to implement all of this now?
Well, I think we would all understand that this is not in the playbook. When you become an athletics director or a coach or anybody on this campus, you just do not anticipate what we have gone through. I can tell you that being a part of the university task force under President Kaslan's leadership and then in athletics, I've been so impressed with the diligence, the expertise from our scientists, our epidemiologists, and all the work that has gone into the development of a protocol to return to campus. It hasn't been a decision we're just coming back. We tried to put the scientific evidence in front of us to give us an opportunity, but it's a daunting task, and it's just like it's like playing a game. You want to win, and we're trying to win with what we're going to do in this protocol, bringing our young people back as we do for the summer to train, and when we return in the fall with our students as well. We want to have the mitigation in place to make it a very successful situation here at our university.
David Clevenger from the Post and Courier asks, has there been a special team formed just to handle COVID-19 within the athletics department? And if so, who heads that?
I'm sorry, Steve, could you ask that again?
Yes, if I bring it back up. Basically, he wondered, is there a team that's been formed within the athletics department to handle the COVID-19 situation, and who heads that for us?
Yes, we have it's called FFPG 7. There's 7 on the entire campus, and one rests in athletics alone. And Jeff Talent is the lead of that group, and it includes all the people that I mentioned earlier in the conversation. We have different titles. I'm the coach of that team. He's the lead of that group, and there's 6 more throughout the campus community. And we're on video conference 3 or 4 times a week along with President Kaslan, and we have been for many weeks. We will be going forward as well as we monitor data and statistics and trends that we have before us, and listening to our scientists and epidemiologists.
Ben Briner from the State asks, how much of a worry is player socialization with others outside their clusters, and is there a central message to them about how they deal with that?
It is a concern. When exams were over just last week, I guess it was, we have a lot of young people who live here in Columbia that are students that live off campus that didn't necessarily go home. So you started to see some gatherings around 5 Points that gave us some serious concern with lack of face coverings and social distancing, and that is a concern. But we're going to do our very best to emphasize the importance with our student athletes before they return to campus. It'll begin before that. That we'll try to emphasize how important it is to follow the proper protocols to avoid getting involved with this deadly disease and having to deal with it. So it's very important. It's a concern. Young people are, they tend to branch out a little bit more than maybe some of the rest of us. So that's a concern. But I'll pass out Izzy Rushton's name. She's our student body president. She's involved with these committees, and she's taken it upon herself to be a leader to her peers on campus, and hopefully will be very successful under her leadership.
Scott Eisberg from WCIV in Charleston has the next question, Coach. It's about his concern is with the clusters as well. And if someone in a position group goes down with the COVID, could that take down an entire position group? And is there any way to separate like position players so the entire group doesn't go into quarantine at the same time?
I would guess, because I haven't examined it that closely. But I would probably tell you that the clusters are probably staggered, not by having all the quarterbacks in one group and all the wide receivers and all the linemen in one group, I would probably tell you that those clusters were broken up a little bit. So I think that we really have a tremendous protocol in place as we begin our conditioning and our weightlifting. It'll be certainly more concerning as we get deeper into the summer and we start, maybe fall practice and we start with more people in groups. But hopefully by then, all the results are positive and everybody's in a good place and your worries are less.
Mike Uva from Watch Fox asks, will quarantine for players depend on how the player arrives on campus, i.e. whether they're coming via car or plane, as well as where they are coming from?
Yeah, that's a part of the conversation that our football staff and are looking into right now, and when they're going to return. But when they get here, again, it's not going to be let's all meet and we're going to have a team meeting over at the Long Family Football Operations Center. They will be put into their clusters, and we'll start the testing process in their clusters. They'll stay in their clusters until the results come back to us, and then when we start lifting and running, they again will stay in their clusters. It's not going to be large groups in the weight room, and after each group leaves the weight room, it will be cleaned and disinfected as well. So we have a great protocol in place as we begin our workouts.
Phil Kornblut has the next question. He asks about the finances and keeping the athletes healthy through all the testing and cleaning. What kind of financial expense is the school looking at, and ultimately who pays for that? Does that come out of the athletic department coffers?
Yes, currently that is the plan. As I understand it, and although it might not be 100% certain, the first COVID test will be covered by insurance. The antibody test is not, and there's a range. If you have looked into it personally, you will see a range of antibody testing. So without speaking to certainty, it's probably between $40 to $100, $120, according to what you're looking at and who's doing antibody testing. So that would be an athletic department expense.
Ben Briner from the state notes that some high schools and youth sports are avoiding using their locker rooms. Will USC be using the locker rooms in the short term?
We will not be. In the short term, we will not be using locker rooms. Players will enter the facility. They'll get their checks. They'll do the evaluations. This is after they have been negative for COVID. So they'll go in, do their weight work, and then they'll leave the facility, and food will be provided. But again, it'll be a box type situation, carry out situation, but we will not be using locker rooms and showers in the near term.
Colin Taylor from Gamecock Central has the next question. Colin asks, what was the reaction from coaches about the news that players could come back? And did any coaches from any sport express concerns about bringing students back to campus in June?
There were lots of questions. I think that I've been extremely delighted to engage with our coaches. They're they have a lot of questions themselves, but they're very concerned about what we're going through with this coronavirus, and we have shared the protocols. They have given us their protocols. They're anxious to see their student athletes again. It hasn't been a focus of a competitive position where we've got to get our players back. We got to get back to work, and we don't want anybody to get an advantage. It hasn't been that at all. It's been more about the health, safety, and welfare of getting everybody back together if possible. And like I said to you, we know that football will be back in the weight room on June 8th. The other sports are going to decide when they would like to return. Some will probably come soon thereafter. Others may not come quite as early, but it will be their decision as to when they want to put their team back together. And but it's been great. The coaches understand. They want us to get it right. It's like getting ready for competition, and we're doing our prep work, and they've been very helpful in engaging and trying to get it right in returning athletes.
John Whittle from the Big Spur asks, are you still in the decision-making process of potentially cutting any sport And if so, what kind of timetable are you looking to make that decision?
There isn't a timetable. I think that you recognize that across this country, a lot has happened in cost-cutting measures. We have made some cost-cutting measures internally. The campus has as well. There's no question that we're in a period that we have to reduce cost. Dropping sports is out of consideration. It has to be on your list. Is it high on my list? No. Is it something that I want to do? No. So it's not an immediate priority. We will move through this process. We're still quite a ways away from September 5th and what a football season might look like. It's no secret that football is your financial engine in your department. So that plays heavily on what happens from a financial standpoint, but there's still some time in front of us to make some determinations and to understand exactly what the financial pressures are going to be.
John follows that up with what specifically makes you want to stick with men's soccer, given that it's not an SEC sport and since the program is about to be in transition.
We've had men's soccer for a long time, and there's been some success, and we have young people who play the sport that are passionate about it. Coach Mark Burson has been here for a long time. It's more, I think, emotional than it is looking at the fact that it's not an SEC sport. But it's important to, what we do at this university, and it has been here for a long time. So, as I said, I hope that we're not in a position that cutting sports is part of our financial process. If it turns out to be that way, then it'll be necessary. But I hope that we can keep our sports intact.
And one more men's soccer question from John. What are the conversations right now with Conference USA and the status of that season, or any changes to the season that could be made?
Haven't had any conversations with Conference USA about that. You hear some people talk about regionalizing competition and so forth, but we haven't been a part of that. The Southeastern Conference, Commissioner Sankey, we continue to understand that there's time, that we don't have to rush into things yet. We still have time on our side. Eventually, we will have to make some decisions. We are in an 11-state footprint. What will that mean? Will it have any effect when we begin? We don't know yet, but we're hopeful that this pandemic will be in a different place in the next couple of months or in 3 months, and we'll be able to proceed with our fall sports as we have planned. We can't say for sure right now, but we're preparing and planning for that as we go forward.
John Del Bianco from the Big Spur with the next question. Has Coach Muschamp given you an approximate of how many players he expects to be using the operations facility in June?
Well, we talked about the numbers that are here and they're coming back. It'll be a normal situation. We hope that it'll be 100 to 110 total players once we begin our workouts. And like I said, we're going to bring them back in clusters, but they're all going to be here in roughly a couple of 3 days, if not the same day, in a couple of days that we'll all be back together, and then try to get everybody cleared with a COVID test negative and get them in the weight room on June 8th.
Cam Gaskins from ABC Columbia asks, what hurdles still remain in place before approved team activities can take place? And is there any timeline for when you would hope team activities can begin?
I've asked that question a number of times already. I know that the first 2 weeks are going to be strength and conditioning only. Even the voluntary workouts are somewhat in question. Whether you can get some balls up or whether receivers and quarterbacks can throw to each other. Those things are in question right now. Even the virtual work is still in play. For instance, the players can't stay in the facility to watch tape. They still have to do it virtually. They'll have to go back to their dorm or their apartment and do the video work virtually. So they won't leave the weight room and go to a their position room for a video session. That will not be the case. So there's still a lot of protocol in place. I don't know exactly when we'll be in a position that, we get back to normal activity. I would like to hope that because spring football was cut short, that there would be a time maybe in July that you get a few days back. Maybe not spring football in the same sense, but at least helmets and shorts where they get a chance to maybe have a few days. But the NCAA has not approved that. I know that it may be on their list of requests, but we haven't received anything back yet. But, we're hopeful that that could be the case as well.
Next couple of questions from Joe Gorchow, WIS. Coach, if an athlete does not feel comfortable returning to campus, will that athlete lose his or her scholarship?
No, that will not be the case. And it's not mandatory. It's the only thing is you can't return to activity unless you do the testing. It's not a situation that we want to force them to do anything, but we also can't allow them to return to activity without doing the testing.
Will the football staff strictly monitor player movement outside of campus to limit potential spread within the facility?
It will be a challenge, but I think there's been some conversations about some monitoring that could go on to try to do our very best to keep our young people isolated and stay out of too many people that are not social distancing. Got to be wearing your face covering. We got to do all the things that are appropriate. It's been proven scientifically that this virus can be controlled to a great extent with social distancing and using face covering. So I'm very hopeful that our young people would adhere to those policies and the information that we put before them to exercise those kind of precautions.
Pete at the AP with a similar question. Are coaches prepared to deal with and or accept any player's decision to not want to come back at the moment and wait longer before they return?
Well, we've talked about it, and that it is a situation. I think that there could be a young man or young woman that's not quite comfortable at this stage coming back, and it would be their decision. That the coaches aren't going to put any pressure on them to come back.
And along those lines, John Whittle asks, have any student athletes, regardless of sport, said they do not plan to come back because of the COVID-19?
I have not heard that. I've asked a couple of coaches just in conversation, have they had any type of dialogue with any of their student athletes at this point? And they said that they had not.
Ben Briner asks, will the new incoming freshmen that will they be enrolling as well? Or are only returning student athletes set to come back on campus at this time?
The new players as well.
And Colin Taylor asks, if full capacity isn't allowed at Williams-Brice this fall, how will the athletic department determine which fans will be allowed in the stadium?
That's a good question. Please send that one in. That we are studying. We have been. We're looking at models. We are having conversations with our peers, other people across the country about those scenarios. We haven't been through that before. Do not know what that would look like. I'm not sure what the priority would be, but it hasn't been a situation where we're just ignoring it and we'll see what happens. We got to study it. We got to understand that you could have a game with no fans. You could have a game with social distancing. How many do you get into your stadium? We've done some extensive work already on that, but I'm not in a position to say what it would be and what it means and who gets priority and who doesn't. That's still to be determined, and I would hope that we'd be in a great spot come September 5th. But if we aren't, we will adjust.
At this time, I do not have any other questions in the queue. Give one last call. Anybody have anything that they would like to ask Coach Tanner before we let him go?
Okay, Steve, if there are no other questions, I would just like to, again, thank everybody for taking the time to join in today. I can assure you that we have worked extremely hard, been very thorough. The football staff and the people there have done a heck of a job developing their internal protocol. Our medical professionals on campus, Dr. Pearson, Dr. Nolan, Dr. Beck, so many people have worked to help us get in a position that we can be safe upon our return, do the testing that we need to do, and give our student athletes a chance to prepare for the fall. And let's all pray that we get this pandemic behind us and we get back to our normal lives and enjoy some football in the fall.
Coach, before we let you go, we have one final question from David Kleininger. Has construction at Williams-Brice Stadium been stalled in any way?
What was it? Has construction been stalled? Is that what you said?
Correct. Has slowed or stalled at any point?
No, it hasn't. Actually, we're doing quite well over there. I know that there was a story that came out of Alabama. We have not had any situations at Williams-Brice Stadium that have been negative. The state of South Carolina allowed us to continue construction when the pandemic hit, and we're making great progress. Greg Hughes Contract Construction. It's in a very impressive state right now. We've got some time left on this project, but we have moved forward and we haven't taken any days off.
Great. No other questions have come in, so I think that'll wrap it today. Again, appreciate everybody taking the time on a Friday afternoon for this, and hope it helps you, and everybody have a great Memorial Day weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.